will and grace. But not the TV show, okay? The power of will and grace. So good morning, Unity friends and guests, present and online. Welcome to Unity of Fort Wayne. I'm Reverend Wanda, and I get to be the lucky person who's spiritual leader of this beautiful community. And I say, yay! For those who are unfamiliar with our movement, Unity stands for a universal, spirit-centered, and practical spiritual path that invites all people to live in alignment with divine presence, fostering health, prosperity, and peace through compassionate community living. Founded as a healing ministry, Unity teaches that prayer, affirmations, and meditation can transform through our thoughts and into our lives. We interpret the Bible and all scripture for that matter metaphysically, seeing it as a guide for spiritual growth and how to live our lives daily. We affirm the sacred worth of all people, celebrate diversity, and promote freedom, love, and courage as our core values. I trust you will find Unity a place where you and your questions are welcome. Join me now in prayer if you feel like it. Just gently close your eyes. And we lift this prayer. I now rest in the awareness of divine presence and willingly open my heart and mind to the wisdom and inspiration from within. Peace now enfolds me, and I release all concerns. Resting in this presence, I give thanks, affirming that I am protected and healed, and so it is. So this idea has I'm going to tell you a little story here. I haven't spoken for a couple of weeks now. I've been working on this magnificent sermon, okay? It's like I was going to blow your mind. Actually, I didn't know what I was talking about, so I had to do a lot of research into Fillmore, and then this past week, the idea of grace kept coming back to me, because how Unity sees grace is a little bit different than what I was taught. So it was amazing. They say when something comes to your mind and then you just start seeing it everywhere, it's because unconsciously you're thinking about it. But this idea of grace just kept popping up. I mean, everything I was reading was about grace. I saw it on TV, Daily Word. Daily Word I think one day this week was on a passage on grace. And I knew what it was about because recently I wasn't very kind to somebody. And this person was trying to help me solve a problem. And I spoke to them very unkindly. And I make no excuses for my behavior. I can give you all the reasons why I did it. But I got to tell you, I'm somewhat embarrassed by my behavior. And I knew I had to ask for forgiveness. I knew it because I was in the old-fashioned word convicted. I was convicted. And I knew I had to apologize and make amends for my behavior. And as the days went by, the feeling didn't get any better. And finally, I made a phone call and apologized. Because I was not very kind that day. It took me a few days to become willing to make amends. And that is where grace begins. Grace begins with willingness. I put myself in the way of grace, and those are Mary Oliver's words. I love Mary Oliver. She's a poet. I chose to put myself in the way of grace. Put yourself in the way of grace, says a friend of ours who is a monk and a bishop and he smiles his floating and shining smile. And truly, truly, can there be a subject of more interest to each of us than whether or not grace exists in the soul? So I called and I did apologize. And I hope for forgiveness for the both of us, because I still carry that embarrassment. In unity teaching, grace is not something rarely gifted upon us or upon only a few, or something we earn from being perfect. We don't earn grace from our perfection. Grace is the continuous activity or energy of love that expresses through all of us. It is our power of will that enables us to consciously connect and cooperate with grace through our choices, our commitments, and willingness itself. Grace is God's gift, and will is our response. Have you ever noticed that there are moments when life just seems to be effortless? Everything is so easy. And then all of a sudden, a difficult conversation comes along. And then it softens. And a burden you've carried for years begins to lift. An answer appears just when you need it. And we often say, that was grace. Yet there are other moments when grace seems absent. We pray, but the circumstances remain unchanged. And we wonder, where's God? Unity teaches that grace has not disappeared, that it is still flowing. So the question is not whether grace is present. The question is whether we are willing, if we are willing to receive it, and then to trust it, and then cooperate with it. Today, I'm going to ask you to think about two powerful spiritual realities. That God's grace is unending. There is no end to the grace of God. And that each of us possess the divine power of will, of choice. Together, will and grace, together, they reveal an extraordinary truth. It is grace that opens the door. It is will that allows us to choose to walk through it. Many Christian traditions teach or describe grace as God's undeserved favor. Undeserved favor. Unity certainly affirms that grace is a gift, but expands our understanding that grace is not an occasion, nor is it selective. Grace is God's nature continually expressing itself. It is divine love in action. Grace is divine love in action. Grace is as constant as the sunlight, and the sun does not choose who it is going to shine upon. Likewise, God does not decide whom to love. Love simply shines, and grace simply flows. Our experience changes when our consciousness changes. Charles Fillmore reminds us that God is not withholding good from us. God does not withhold good from us. Rather, spiritual growth involves awakening to the good that is already present. That's grace. Grace is the free, unmerited love of God. And that's from the Metaphysical Bible, if you got a copy. While this definition echoes traditional language, Fillmore consistently interprets grace metaphysically. This is Fillmore speaking. As the ever-acting life of God, expressing through us rather than an external reward. Grace is the active love of God expressing through us rather than an external reward. You do not earn grace. You awaken to it. Grace is already present. Paul writes in 2 Corinthians, "My grace is sufficient for you, for power is made in weakness." Paul doesn't say, "My grace will arrive someday." He says, "My grace is sufficient." That is present tense, and it is always available. Unity teaches that God is eternally expressing life, wisdom, abundance, and love. Grace is already active even before we recognize it. Sometimes we imagine ourselves waiting on God. We're waiting for God to show up. Maybe he's waiting or she's waiting for us to show up. Charles Fillmore taught that every person possesses 12 spiritual faculties. And among them is the power of will. That's the will of this month. And it is often misunderstood. Human will says, "I will force things to happen. I will force things to happen." Divine will says, no, I willingly align myself with my highest good. I willingly align myself to the highest good. Will is not stubbornness. It's like willpower. I'm going to do this. It's not like that. It is spiritual direction. It is spiritual direction. It is the power to choose, and it is the willingness to say yes to truth. Fillmore describes the faculty of will as the capacity to direct our life consciously towards God, rather than reacting from life's circumstances. Our choices, what we choose, becomes the steering wheel of our consciousness. Grace gives, okay, here we go, will and grace. Grace gives, will receives. Grace invites. It is will that responds. Grace forgives. Will begins again. Imagine standing beside a flowing river. Imagine. That river represents grace, and it is moving constantly in our lives. But we have to decide whether or not we're going to step into the stream. That decision is will. Grace never forces. Love never will force you or coerce you. Divine love constantly invites. Jesus repeatedly invited people into cooperation with grace. Listen to that. It's a great, powerful sentence. Jesus repeatedly invited people to cooperate with grace. To the man at the pool of I got this thing in my mouth for my tooth. I'm having a hard time. Bethsaida, he asked, "Do you want to be made well?" Do you want to be made well? That's a powerful question. Do you want to be made well? Seems kind of like an unnecessary question when you're asking someone who can't walk. And it is not safe to assume he really did. Sometimes we become attached to our suffering. And sometimes change requires courage. Jesus honored the man's freedom to choose. That was grace. That was grace when he chose. Healing was available, but the invitation required willingness. Unity minister Linda Martella Wislet has written beautifully about grace as the natural expression of our divine identity. Your divinity is never absent, and that's from Discover Your Divinity, a modern guide to affirmative prayer. That simple statement changes everything. Your divinity is never absent. If our divinity is never absent, then grace is never absent. If grace is never absent, our work is not to become worthy. It is not our work to become worthy. Our work is to become willing. Unity often associates the spiritual faculty of will with purposeful direction. And every day we get to choose. Every day we make these choices. Will I forgive? Will I trust? Will I speak kindly? Kind of bombed on that one. Will I bless instead of criticize? Will I see the Christ in another? These choices, how we speak, and the choices we make shape our consciousness. Every loving choice strengthens our awareness of grace. Every fearful choice covers it. The light has not changed. The light has always been on. The only thing that changes is our attention. Unity's fifth principle teaches that it is not enough to know spiritual truth, that we must live it. Grace reveals truth. Will embodies truth. Grace whispers, you are God's beloved, and will answers, I will live as God's beloved. Grace says, you are whole, and will says, I will choose healthy thoughts. Grace says, you are forgiven. You are forgiven. And will releases resentment. Knowledge becomes transformation only through practice. We practice. Suppose someone hurts you. Now, on my situation earlier, let's reverse it. Someone hurts me. Someone speaks unkindly to me. Grace says, you remain loved. Just because people treat me like I'm not loved, I am loved. And will ask, what will you choose? What will you choose? Suppose you receive difficult news, bad news. Grace says, I am with you. And will ask, will you trust? Will you trust? And suppose you make a mistake, like you really made a big mistake. In a relationship or at work, with your neighbor, you make a mistake. And grace says, you are not your failure. You are not the collection of all the failures of your life. And will ask you, are you willing to begin again? Grace opens the door. And will says yes. For meditation, let's just take a few brief moments for meditation. I'm going to do a little guided meditation. So if you're comfortable doing so, I would put my feet flat on the floor. That grounds you. And take a few deep breaths. And as you do so, kind of survey your body, your shoulders and your jaw, your neck especially. And as you breathe, become aware of the breath. Deep breaths all the way down. And just feel the life in your body, moving in and out. Love in, light out. Love in, light out. Now feel yourself resting in the presence of divine love. Just in your mind's eye, imagine just encompassed with divine love, all around light. Imagine yourself standing in a beautiful, beautiful meadow early in the morning as you see the sunrise. And then this light from the sun gently touching the earth. You feel its warmth. This light asks nothing of you. Nothing of you. This light is grace all around. This light shines only because it is its nature to shine. Now notice a path before you. No one is pushing you. No one is pulling you. This path just opens up. And it is waiting for you to decide. And you hear this voice. I am with you. My grace has never left you. And as you look at this path and you feel the warmth of the light, you can feel a quietness within your heart. And you know that this is will. It is not something that is forcing you or that you are struggling with. It is simply sacred willingness. And you know that at this moment, divine grace lives within me. I willingly receive God's love. I choose peace. I choose forgiveness. I choose courage. And I choose joy. And you lift your feet and you take a step onto this beautiful path before you. And the light grows brighter. With each step, the light of grace shines brighter. And you know that you are not alone. are surrounded by love and grace as you walk towards the light. And as you continue to breathe in and breathe out, breathing in this light and breathing out love, take a few cleansing breaths. And when you are ready, bring your awareness back into this time and this space. When you are ready, open your eyes. Know that grace has never depended upon your perfection. It has always depended upon God's nature. And God's nature is love. The spiritual journey is not about convincing God to bless us. It is about becoming willing to receive the blessing that is already given. Every morning, grace awakens us. Every choice invites us to cooperate with us. Every act of kindness, every forgiveness, every prayer, every courageous step is will joining hands with grace. Finally, they're together. Please join me in affirming, silently affirm with me, divine grace is always present. I willingly receive God's love. I choose faith over fear. I choose forgiveness over resentment. I choose compassion over judgment. I joyfully cooperate with God's grace. I am an expression of Christ's presence. I am an expression of Christ's presence. And so it is. In closing, I'd like to share a few lines again by Mary Oliver. And this is from the poem, just a few lines from Sand Dabs 5. That's the name of the poem. What men build in the name of security is built of straw. Does the grain of sand know that it is a grain of sand? And my dog Ben, he has a mouth as big as the tabernacle. You can have other words. You can have other words. Chance, luck, coincidence, serendipity. I take grace. I don't know what it is exactly, but I'll take it. May you be abundantly blessed this week with the awareness of divine grace that you are.